The starship Eclipse hung in the void like a predator, its sleek, obsidian hull reflecting the faint light of a distant sun. It was a warship, a symbol of the Dominion's might, and aboard it was a cargo more valuable than any weapon or resource. They called her spoils of war. Her real name was Lyra, though no one had spoken it in years. Once she had been a scientist, a brilliant mind working on the edge of the Andromeda expanse, developing technologies to terraform barren worlds. But when the Dominion swept through her colony, they took everything: her research, her freedom, her identity. She became a prize, a trophy to be traded among the Dominion's elite. Now, she stood in the dimly lit cargo bay of the Eclipse, her wrists bound by magnetic cuffs, her once proud posture broken by months of captivity. The Dominion had stripped her of everything but her mind, and even that felt like a fading ember. She had no idea where they were taking her, only that her new owner awaited her at their destination. The ship shuddered as it exited hyperspace, and Lyra braced herself against the cold metal wall. The doors hissed open, and two armored guards entered, their faces obscured by helmets. They grabbed her roughly by the arms and dragged her toward the exit. She didn't resist. Resistance was futile. The planet below was a harsh, barren world, its surface scarred by endless deserts and jagged mountains. The Dominion had established a fortress here, a sprawling complex of black stone and steel that loomed over the landscape like a malevolent god. This was where her new life would begin, or end. The guards marched her through the fortress's labyrinthine corridors, past rows of soldiers and servants who averted their eyes. She was nothing to them, just another captive, another piece of property. Finally, they reached a set of ornate double doors, engraved with the sigil of the Dominion's ruling family. The guards shoved her inside, and the doors slammed shut behind her. The room was vast and opulent, a stark contrast to the austerity of the rest of the fortress. A man stood by the window, his back to her, silhouetted against the planet's pale sun. He was tall and broad-shouldered, his posture radiating authority. When he turned to face her, Lyra's breath caught in her throat. His name was Cale Arcturus, the youngest son of the Dominion's High Chancellor. He was a legend, a warrior who had led countless campaigns to expand the Dominion's reach. His face was handsome but stern, his piercing blue eyes framed by a mane of dark hair. He studied her with a mixture of curiosity and disdain. "So," he said, his voice deep and commanding, "you are the famed Lyra Voss, the scientist who dared to defy the Dominion." Lyra lifted her chin, defiant despite her fear. "I did what I believed was right. If that's a crime, then so be it." Cale's lips twitched in what might have been a smile. Brave words from a prisoner. But bravery won't save you here. He stepped closer, his gaze sweeping over her. Lyra forced herself to meet his eyes, refusing to show weakness. Cale reached out and touched the magnetic cuffs on her wrists. With a flick of his fingers, they fell away, clattering to the floor. "You won't need those," he said. "You're not going anywhere." Lyra rubbed her wrists, her mind racing. What did he want from her? Why had he taken her as his captive? She had expected to be handed over to some faceless bureaucrat or warlord, not to the Dominion's most celebrated warrior. Cale turned and walked to a table laden with food and drink. He poured himself a glass of wine and gestured for her to join him. "Sit," he said. "Eat. You look like you haven't had a decent meal in weeks." Lyra hesitated, then sat down. She was starving, but she refused to let him see her desperation. She picked at the food, her eyes never leaving Cale's face. "Why am I here?" she asked finally. "What do you want from me?" Cale leaned back in his chair, swirling the wine in his glass. "You're here because I requested you. Your knowledge of terraforming technology is unparalleled. The Dominion could use someone like you. Lyra's heart sank. They wanted her to work for them, to use her skills to further their conquests. She shook her head. I won't help you. You can kill me if you want, but I won't betray my principles. Kale's expression hardened. You think this is about principles? This is about survival. The Dominion is unstoppable. You can either join us and live, or resist and die. The choice is yours. Lyra stared at him, her mind a whirlwind of emotions. She wanted to hate him, to see him as just another tyrant. But there was something in his eyes, a flicker of something she couldn't quite place. Regret? Loneliness? She wasn't sure. Days turned into weeks, and Lyra remained in Kale's fortress. He gave her a spacious suite of rooms and access to a well-equipped laboratory, but she refused to work. Instead, she spent her time exploring the fortress, observing its inhabitants, and trying to understand the man who held her captive. Kale was an enigma. He was ruthless in his duties, commanding his troops with an iron fist. But in private, he was different. He would often visit her in the evenings, bringing books or rare artifacts from his travels. They would talk for hours, debating philosophy, science, and the nature of power. Lyra found herself drawn to him, despite her better judgment. One night, as they sat by the fire in his study, Kale asked her a question that caught her off guard. Do you believe in redemption, Lyra? She frowned. Redemption? For someone like you? He smiled faintly. Yes, for someone like me. Lyra considered her answer carefully. I think everyone deserves a chance at redemption, but it has to be earned. Kale nodded, his gaze distant. I've done terrible things in the name of the Dominion. I used to believe it was necessary, that the ends justified the means. But lately, I've begun to wonder. Lyra's heart skipped a beat. Was he questioning his loyalty to the Dominion? She leaned forward, her voice soft. What changed? Kale looked at her, his eyes filled with a mixture of pain and hope. You did. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Lyra felt a surge of emotion she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. She reached out and took his hand, her fingers trembling. Kale, if you truly want to change, then help me. Together, we can find a way to stop the Dominion. Kale's grip tightened around her hand. It won't be easy. The Dominion is powerful, and they won't let us go without a fight. Lyra smiled, a spark of her old determination returning. Then we'll fight. Together. In the weeks that followed, Lyra and Kale worked in secret, gathering allies and resources. They knew they couldn't take on the Dominion alone, but with Lyra's knowledge and Kale's influence, they had a chance. They grew closer, their bond deepening with each passing day. What had begun as a relationship born of captivity had blossomed into something real, something powerful. The final battle came on the outskirts of Dominion space. Lyra and Kale led a coalition of rebels and defectors against the Dominion fleet. The battle was fierce, the stars themselves seeming to burn with the intensity of their struggle. But in the end, they emerged victorious. As the last Dominion ship retreated, Lyra stood on the bridge of their command ship, Kale by her side. They had done the impossible. They had struck a blow against tyranny and found freedom, not just for themselves, but for countless others. Kale turned to her, his eyes filled with love and admiration. You were right, he said. Redemption is possible, and I owe mine to you. Lyra smiled, tears in her eyes. We did it together, and now we can build something better, something worthy of the stars. As they embraced, the stars outside the viewport seemed to shine a little brighter, as if celebrating their victory. They had been called many things, captive and captor, enemy and ally. But now, they were simply two people who had found love in the unlikeliest of places, and in doing so, had changed the course of the galaxy forever.